You're listening to the Sisterhood of Limitless Living podcast. I'm your host, Dr. April Moreno. I'm a public health specialist focused on integrative wellness and autoimmune living, supporting the community of women, where I help you to live your best quality of life through being your best self-advocate. Let's get started. Welcome to the Sisterhood of Limitless Living podcast. I hope you're doing well out there during these interesting pandemic times. It's an opportunity in a century for us to learn about pandemics nationally, internationally, and understand what public health is about. And also, I hope that you're taking good care out there, especially as part of the autoimmune community. Autoimmunity and this pandemic have some definite connections, and it's really crucial that we take those extra precautions to protect ourselves, as the immune system is highly involved with this viral process that's out there. So in the news, we see recently that AstraZeneca was working on a clinical trial for a vaccine, and it is common that in clinical trials, because you're working with a lot of unknowns, you don't know the outcome, you can't prove that it's going to be effective. But they did find this person with a side effect who was diagnosed with transverse myelitis, and that really brought more about autoimmunity to the forefront in the media, in the news, in the country, and possibly in different countries as well. So transverse myelitis is known as a condition that affects the central nervous system, more specifically the spinal cord. It is actually similar to multiple sclerosis, as you might have heard, or NMO, neuromyelitis optica. In some cases, people that have fewer than one lesion of MS are often diagnosed with transverse myelitis. So it's possible even that this person, depending on the number of lesions, could actually even have MS. And we don't know for sure if it was a trigger or if it was a cause of the vaccine. We just don't know. And so I don't know if science is able to accurately get that answer at this time, especially with one participant in this clinical trial who was diagnosed with the transverse myelitis. But just all of that to say that autoimmunity is out there, it's in the news, and it is an issue as we look at this vaccine development and how we're going to get through this pandemic season. Take good care out there. I know that if you're immunocompromised, it's often a concern about whether to take certain types of live vaccines, for example, and how it may affect any sort of drug that you're taking, disease-modifying medication that's out there. We're trying to keep up with the news and updates about the vaccine, the pandemic, and how it affects people of various autoimmune conditions, to see that we're going to make it through. And we will make it through with the correct precautions. I wanted to share the good news about my nonprofit organization that started this year as well, where we do look at the research, especially behavioral research, cultural, socially determined research with the factors of diversity. We are an autoimmune nonprofit by, for, and about health equity in autoimmune research, advocacy, and support. Our board is completely diverse. We have representatives in the board from the RA, MS, and lupus communities at this time. Everyone on the board of directors is a person of color, and it wasn't hard at all to get diversity on the board. So we are dedicated to autoimmune health equity. We do the research in-house. We do look at secondary data. We look at existing data sources to find out trends in people of color and various autoimmune conditions. We conduct research, community-based participatory research, to work with the community to identify what is important to the community, and so that the community has input and has a say in how the research is collected, what types of research are collected, what the research is about, and even the end product of the research, which is very rare in a research study for people to be connected to actual end results of the study that they were involved in. The Autoimmune Community Institute exists for these purposes, as well as community support and advocacy. We are going to be hosting our opening event October 10th. And if you are interested in joining us, or if you'd like to make a donation to help us with our efforts, visit acicommunity.org. It's the Autoimmune Community Institute. In this episode, we're going to be speaking about various topics about autoimmunity. And this is a great conversation I had with Juana and Estela Mata of Looms for Lupus. We're going to be talking about so many different themes and topics. And I was just like, how should I name this episode? There are so many wonderful things that we talked about. We talked about the fact that autoimmunity runs in families. We talked about the fact that there are more than one autoimmune condition that people may be susceptible to. We talked about family and cultural dynamics of living with an autoimmune condition, sharing that information with your own family, relatives, and actually getting the diagnosis. We also talked about the linkages with mental health and autoimmunity. And then we even talked about the complete importance of community support and how that can help you to save your quality of life, improve your conditions, and protect you from relapse in the future. So I hope you enjoy this episode. I loved talking to Juana and Estela, really bonded. I love the fact that my husband is from the very same town they are from in terms of Mexican heritage. It's such a fun and wonderful experience to find people from your communities. And I love diversity. I love the fact that we can talk about multicultural issues and the various dynamics that are influencing our quality of life and the way that we live with autoimmune conditions, the way that we get diagnosed, but then more wonderful, the way that we find community support. So I hope you enjoy this episode with Juana and Estela Mata of Looms for Lupus. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Sisterhood of Limitless Living. Today we're going to be speaking with Juana and Estela Mata, and they're going to be sharing their experiences of living with chronic illness and autoimmune conditions. And they are founders of Looms for Lupus, a nonprofit organization in Southern California. So welcome, Juana and Estela.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, and thank you for having us today. We're excited
to
be here and share our journeys.
Thank you for being here. I'm really excited too. Please introduce yourselves a little bit more. Tell us more about you.
Good morning again. My name is Juana Mata. I am one of the co-founders of Looms for Lupus, and I was also diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis and lupus 11 years ago. My journey has been having ups and downs, but with family support and advocacy that I have been doing has helped me not only learn, but also cope with all the struggles that I go through with lupus.
And hi, I'm Estela Mata, and I'm here with my sister, Juana. And, like she was saying, her journey started about a while ago with lupus. She almost lost her life because of it. And since then, we founded Looms for Lupus, which is an organization that provides support not only to those living with lupus, but also their loved ones and caregivers. And that was very, very important for us because as a loved one, seeing someone struggle with an illness and not knowing much about it, back then there was no cure, there was, it can cause death, and there were no treatments specifically for the medication. So it was very important for us to learn about what lupus was, to learn about the treatments, if there were any, and also to know what types of medications she was going to take and side effects, and how we can help her and help ourselves. There was not a lot of information in Spanish. We knew that we needed support for my mom. We are a big family. We're very close. So we knew that it was going to affect all of us. So we started getting together, and my sister started loom knitting, which is where the Looms for Lupus originated from.
About the loom knitting, tell us how that got started and how it helped you.
When I was initially diagnosed 11 years ago, I was going through different treatments, And of course, the stress and just thinking about what can happen to me. And like Estela said, the only thing that back then, the only thing that you could find out in the internet about lupus, it was no cure and death. So I needed to keep myself busy doing something. I needed to think about something else other than focusing in lupus. So I started loom knitting. I remember going to the store, looking at that looming kit, and I thought it was interesting. So I started making I started making scarves, and I felt that doing that, I was focused in something other. My mind was just focusing on how to loom knit because of course I was learning. So that was one of the reasons that has helped me so much, because my mind is focused on doing the right move instead of focusing on the pain or what's going to happen to me tomorrow.
Wow, that's a powerful message. Focusing on something so that we can continue to move forward.
Right.
Journey. Estela, we have some experiences where when one person has one autoimmune condition, there are relatives in the family who will also are likely to get another autoimmune condition or autoimmune related condition. And also if you do have one, sometimes it's likely that you would get another one as well. Estela, can you share with us your experience as well?
Yes, I'll share a little bit before I tell you what I was diagnosed with and when I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Throughout, from 11 years ago when my sister originally was diagnosed from lupus, since then, my mom was diagnosed with drug-induced lupus, which is a form of lupus that if you're going to get one, that's the one to have, because that one, as soon as you control your medications, then you don't have the symptoms anymore. So that did happen to my mom. We do have other autoimmune conditions, but my mom is diabetic and hypertensive, and because she was out of control, she was diagnosed with drug-induced lupus. Then you kind of add other autoimmune. Hypothyroidism runs in our family. My sister Juana lives with it, and my other younger sister. So that has been also in our family. And for myself, I've been living with chronic pain for a long time. So there were a lot of times where I thought that I may have lupus too. And it took me a while because there's really no fibromyalgia test or lupus test. So we had to go through all these circles to try and figure out what was wrong with me, because a lot of my symptoms mimic lupus. And so I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia 2 years ago. And I think what helped me get that diagnosis was my younger daughter had been diagnosed with fibromyalgia at the age of 13. So altogether, there's a lot of autoimmune in our family. And, it does help to know what your family health histories are, because it helps you get a diagnosis. And it also helps the providers kind of understand what your genetic composition and what you bring to the table. So that's one of the things that I've learned in the journey of me getting diagnosed.
This theme of family and also health equity is emerging as we talk. And I'm really interested in hearing about what the experience has been like, for example, for your mom or for your family or in the Latinx community, what that experience is like to get a diagnosis when we're looking at different cultures, different backgrounds, different languages. What are those dynamics looking like?
So I'll be honest with you, a lot in our culture, as moms, we don't like to complain about the pain and feeling tired, waking up super fatigued, achy. We tend to kind of push them aside because we have all of our daily chores, and we don't like to really talk about what we are feeling, because, we are taught from when we're young in our culture to, whatever you're feeling, like you keep indoors and you just kind of share with it within your family, and you don't really think much about it. You don't want to be the complainer. So one of the things that I've noticed is a lot of us tend to kind of suppress all these symptoms. And I think it's very important to talk about them and to write them down. And then when we go to the doctor, we have, this trust with the providers when it comes to following what they want to do or prescribe or treat us or maybe dismiss a diagnosis. And, my sister Juana is alive today because she empowered herself. She fought the doctor. I mean, not physically, obviously, but the doctor had sent her home because she looked fine. Because she, I think there is a little bit of bias. Like, you're a woman, you're Hispanic, Latina, you're fine, you look beautiful, you're in heels. You can't tell me you're in chronic pain and that that there's something wrong. So she got a diagnosis of anxiety. And should she have gone home that day, she would have died. So that's just like our little small journey about it. But I do think being women and not talking about tracking our symptoms, and also kind of standing up for ourselves, with someone that we believe like has a white coat and knows what they're doing, we need to empower ourselves.
Yeah, similarly, the autoimmune side of my family is on the Mexican side. So there is really no way for us to have prepared or predicted or been, aware of the fact that autoimmunity runs in the family, because these are not things that we talked about. When you get it, it's kind of very individualized with the experience, because you just didn't know. And even though, you have a family and you're connected to people, you can still feel very alone when it comes to the illness, because we just never knew. We never talked about it.
Yeah, I know it's something that I think we need to, at least I know now with my family. So I think the more you learn, like that's what you want to change and you want to make change. And one of the reasons, again, why we started advocating and sharing our story is because we want to empower our communities. We want to empower those women, those Hispanic, Latina women, to speak up and share, besides all of the symptoms that we're going through with fibromyalgia, with lupus, or just whether it's diabetes and hypertension, which runs a lot in the Hispanic Latino community, we don't talk about mental health. And mental health is huge. It's a huge part, because fibromyalgia and lupus, a lot of these flares are triggered by stress. And when we don't take care of our mental health, we are then affecting our physical health. And in turn, with lupus, like your lupus starts attacking your organs. There's just so much that I think as in our culture that we need to talk about. I mean, we've had, like you said, in the family, people have died in our family. We don't know what they died from, because they would just say, oh, she was sick. She never talked about it. And I don't know what was wrong with her, but she died. She was young and she died. We had a first cousin at the age of 15 that died from complications of juvenile diabetes, or diabetes type 1. So I didn't know it was an autoimmune. It's an autoimmune. And then you go back to it. Now, my other sister, younger sister, also has lupus. I mean, you start looking at all this and it's pretty scary.
And unfortunately, especially in the Hispanic Latinx communities, we don't want to go to the doctor right away. We want to take home remedies or do things at home to see if we get better. So a lot of the times our older generations didn't get tested for conditions because they refused to go to the doctor, because they thought that home remedies was going to help them. So that's another thing that, for us, we don't know if any of our family members had lupus or had any autoimmune disease, because they really never went to the doctor because they were doing their home remedies.
Yeah. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they work temporarily. And these are some of the things that we've seen where, when we do get diagnosed, it's already like somewhat more advanced, because in our community, in the Latinx community, that this is something that occurs. There's certain autoimmune conditions that are like, they think only Europeans get that. So there's no way that it would have even occurred to me for you to have had those symptoms. It must have been something else. We're seeing these examples, experiences where people are much more advanced with the illness because it took so long for various reasons to get the diagnosis. So it's doing what we can is so important. Can we talk about some of the ways in which you address challenges in your lives with chronic illness?
Some things that I do, like I said, my family support is very important to me. So just sharing, talking to my family members, and also learning, making sure that I keep track of my symptoms, learning about the symptoms and learning about my condition. So that has helped me. But I think the support is actually something that really, really is important for somebody who is having challenges. Sometimes we may need help with, not necessarily to pick up or do something physical, but just to have somebody there to support you emotionally.
The support is huge. So, a lot of times you think of a support group as like an AA meeting where it's all negative, it's all, all the bad stuff. And you don't want to go there because you feel like what am I going to say? Like, I'm going to be forced to say something. And, that is what we wanted to change. So the support that we provide, or the support groups, are not all negative. They're not all about crying. Yeah, we do cry. We do get emotional sometimes when we talk about things, but incorporating a lot of art therapy and a lot of crafting into our support groups have been huge, because not only are we all learning and teaching each other about our illnesses, about our, what we're going through and how we are coping with it, because how lupus could affect my sister, it affects someone else differently, because everyone is unique. They call it it's like a snowflake. Everyone is their own individual. And I believe that. So, when you go to a support group, you share and you learn together. And then besides that, the other thing that we incorporated, again, was the art therapy and the different other modalities that will help you continue to live with this illness. Because guess what? This illness does not define you. This illness is just a part of you. So learning these coping mechanisms will help you in your daily life. So by art therapy, I'm thinking about mindfulness. What is mindfulness? Talking about how to rest your mind, how to focus on something specific during that time. We practice meditation. It's not for everyone, but if you could at least calm your mind, it will help you. Yoga, stretching. We talk about, vision board. What is your life going to look like next year? Or what do you have plans for this year outside of just lupus or just outside of fibromyalgia? And then we also craft other things, and we paint, and we do art therapy, and the knitting. Knitting is not for everyone, and scarves are not worn all year, especially here in Southern California. However, the art of loom knitting has been proven to, or just the art therapy has been proven to help individuals. I mean, they use it at hospitals for providers that, that need to relieve their stress. We use it as cognitive therapy. I mean, it's just something that is very useful. So support and learning different techniques is what really has helped us, not only in our personal journeys, but also in our loved ones and others.
Yeah, community is so important. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you learned from others in your support meetings?
Well, during our support meetings, like Estela said, and I mentioned earlier, we share. Sometimes we talk about, what do I do to get a better sleep? What do I do throughout the day? So, we share different things. Sometimes we share about food, what might help you, might help me. But again, like Estela said, we're like snowflakes. We're all different. No one is alike. Therefore, we always have to make sure that we also know what's good and what's not good for us. For example, a lot of lupus patients have a sensitivity to eggplant. I have sensitivity to eggplant, but I know other people in our support groups are allergic to or get flares with tomato. So we're all different. So we're all learning and sharing with one another. What helps me could help you, but we always have to make sure that we can check and monitor ourselves when we are trying something different.
Yes, and some things that I have learned, well, I'll tell you, the first time during our a couple of first support groups, we had someone join us, and she had been living with lupus for over 30 years. So just with her sharing the fact that she had been living with lupus for 30 years gave us hope. I remember we cried that day, because remember, going back 11 years ago, there was no cure. My sister almost died, and there was no specific treatment for FDA approved for lupus. So when we heard her say that she had been living with lupus for 30 years, we cried. We thought there's hope. And then from there, we knew that that was going to be something different. We are learning from each other. We didn't learn a technique. We just learned the fact that she was living with lupus for 30 years. And then you add, other people where, they've been going through like specific treatment that maybe change their mood swings and almost cause their divorce. So then you start taking note and you share that with your loved one or your spouse, so they know that you're not going crazy and they don't want to divorce you because they think you're the one that's causing all this. So, and that's why it's so important to bring loved ones and caregivers to support groups so they can also understand what you're going through, and so they can also share what they're going through with other caregivers and loved ones, because sometimes we can't fix everything, right? We know that. So learning how others cope and deal with or techniques that they utilize is very helpful.
There's so many wonderful themes that are emerging from this conversation. So even the caregivers theme, this is something that is a whole other conversation. And we did one episode in the past where I had my husband on and I interviewed him so I could hear for the first time what he went through when I was diagnosed. I think the caregiver conversation continues to be important, and we need to keep bringing visibility and support to them as well. So I think it's wonderful that Looms for Lupus is also serving caregivers, because it affects them too, right?
Yes,
Definitely. It affects them in many different ways. I mean, just giving the support. And I'm sure that it also takes an emotional struggle with them, because looking or seeing somebody, your loved one, that is going through so many changes and possible death with lupus, it must be very difficult. So our caregivers need to also take care of themselves. So we need to support them so that they can receive the support that they also need.
How are you both managing your health these days? What are some ways that you've been able to take control of your chronic diagnosis and to live well?
I have to say that every day is a struggle. I'm learning every day, and not everything that worked yesterday is going to work today. So I do make sure that not only do I make a note or keep a journal of my symptoms, but I also am mindful that there's things that I know that I cannot do, so I don't force myself to do them. But more than anything, the support, just being close to the family and just having that contact, that conversation about our feelings, because everything that's going on, pandemic and conditions, the fires and everything, it's not only affecting us or me physically, but also emotionally.
Yes. And for me, this is Estela. Tracking the symptoms is obviously one of the main things that we need to continue to do. So whether you journal or whether you just jot it down somewhere is very important, because if you're taking a new medication or if you're feeling a certain way, it's good to kind of take a look at that and talk to your provider. I know it's very scary to go into doctor's offices right now. So one thing that I have been doing, and Juana has been doing as well, is we've been trying to do telemedicine appointments when possible. So if I don't have to go to the doctor and be exposed to COVID or any other conditions, then what I do is we take up either a phone telemedicine appointment or a phone call from our provider. So we have been trying to do that, and it's been working tremendously. So, and also when you're doing telemedicine, you kind of have to prep for it. So take pictures of any rashes that you have. We write down our symptoms. We prepare for our call, make sure our phone is charged. So all that good stuff. And then the other thing that we have been doing during this time is, checking in with each other. We FaceTime my mom almost every day. We call each other every day and we FaceTime each other. So connecting with others through the screen and or a call or a text has been huge. So that's how we've been dealing with it. I mean, there are times where I have had to go to the doctor and get an MRI where you have to, go physically, but you just use all the precautions and try to maintain some sort of, obviously, distance, but also don't distance too much emotionally or socially from whoever you're either talking to or you're, having a conversation with. Because, I know you see it everywhere, like social distance, and I call it more physical distance, don't social distance, because you could still talk to people, you could still try and smile, with your eyes, even though you have the mask on. But that's how we've been dealing with it. Telemedicine, writing down, journaling, and connecting with others.
Power of community connection. Yes, physical distancing is really the thing that we are working on reducing right now to control the pandemic. But yeah, that doesn't mean that we should not talk to people that we love, get in touch with people and community. What advice would you give to somebody who is newly diagnosed and is struggling during all of the stuff that's going on, the fires, the pandemic, and so on, struggling with chronic illness as a new diagnosis?
So I'll give you first, and then I'll have my sister answer. The first thing that comes to my mind is you are not alone. You are not alone, even though you may think and feel that you are going through this struggle by yourself because you are isolated at home. Know that there is help out there. There are support groups. There are virtual support groups. There is someone out there to help you. So just, you are not alone. And also, I mean, we have this slogan, and I'll read it to you. Never give in, never give up, never let go, just keep fighting. And if you could engrave that in your mind to know that there are going to be those days where you're going to struggle, there are going to be those valleys, and there are going to be those peaks. So you have to just kind of go on the journey, but you don't have to do it alone. And that's why we raise awareness. That's why we provide support. That's why we advocate, not only here at our community level, but at the local level, but also at the state and also at the federal level, because we know that not everyone will have, the ability to go and do this. So we will do it for you. And just, again, know that you're not alone. Know that your voice matters, and know that you matter.
Thank you. That's beautiful. I love that, the poem or the saying that you shared.
Estela said it all. I mean, just, reminding everyone that they're not alone, that there's help out there to reach out for help.
Definitely. And then knowing that autoimmune diseases are so common. They're actually really, really common. And for us to connect with one another and know that we definitely are not alone, whether it affects one part of our body or another. There's just so many of us that are out there getting connected and finding the community that you feel is supporting you.
Especially in our Hispanic, Latino, and Asian American, Native American minority communities, African American and Black. And we're more of like the target for these autoimmune conditions. And not only do we, you don't see that a lot. You don't see a lot of people talking about it. And I think it could be our culture, but also we need to participate and be more active when it comes to research, when it comes to learning about things and being vocal. We are minorities, but we really are a majority of who lives here in the United States. So I think that we need to work together as a community and also empower each other and be empathetic with one another, and just be supportive and, educate and bring awareness. Because, as minorities with the COVID, I mean, it's impacting the minority group. Lupus, it impacts the minority groups, all these autoimmune conditions. So what you're doing, April, with your organization and bringing awareness to the minority groups, bringing us on as Hispanic Latino representation, you being Hispanic Latino and Asian representation is huge, because we need someone that looks like us to represent us and to educate us and support us. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for raising awareness and bringing on more voices to the table, because you are a person first and you're a patient second. And our conditions don't define us. So we need to be community, we need to support each other, and we need to raise each other up.
Definitely. I love that. And so, we're partners with the nonprofit organizations, and there's so many amazing and fun things we're going to be doing in the future. I'm really excited. And it's just who we are. We're diverse people. We're people of color. We're minorities. I guess mostly almost like socioeconomic minorities more so than anything else, right? And just being us and normalizing diversity is really what I think is so important right now. Tell us, how can we get in touch with you? How can we find you on social media, learn more about Looms for Lupus?
So you can visit our website. It's loomsforlupus.org, and it's the number 4. So LOOMS for LUPUS. We are on all 3 platforms of social media. So Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Looms for Lupus, LOOMS for Lupus. And we also have our own pages under Juana Mata and Estela Mata. And, we host in-person support groups, but right now they're obviously through Zoom. And then we also provide Spanish support groups via Facebook Live. So come and just learn more about us and see how we can collaborate with each other. So that's what we're about. So hopefully people will know how to connect and connect.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Juana and Estela, for
Thank
being
you
here today.
Thank you, April, for the invitation. We appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sisterhood of Limitless Living podcast, Season 2. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Look forward to having you join us in upcoming episodes as well, where we continue to talk about integrative wellness and autoimmune living our best lives, being our own best advocates. Feel free to subscribe on iTunes to the podcast, and we are also available on several other locations as well. For more information about Dr. April Moreno, you can visit aprilmorenophd.com. Take care.